Good afternoon. My name is Chrissy Matheson, and I'll be your moderator for today's Cabinet press briefing. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the Premier of Nova Scotia, Stephen McNeil, and we'll now begin to take questions from the room.
You said a couple weeks, or you said last week, that you'd have something to say this week about the House, the fall sitting of the House. Is there news?
Yeah, I hope to, yeah.
Tomorrow? Well, this week.
My weeks don't normally always end on Friday. I'm like most Nova Scotians, we work 7 days. But yeah, I just got a few things to tidy up, and then I'll be sending a release out.
Do you anticipate, Premier, that whatever it is you're going to do would wrap completely before Christmas, or are you looking at a scenario where you'd start in December, break for the holiday, and then come back to Province House in January?
Well, ultimately, in order for government to get out, we would require the opposition, if we're debating bills, and how long they debate them would determine all of that stuff.
Which leads into my next question then. Do you have a sense at this point, you had mentioned last week you had seen a bit, do you have a sense at this point how many bills you may be looking at for this sitting?
No.
Is the biodiversity bill going to be called this sitting?
It's in committee of the whole, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Will you be going back to it?
I haven't got that far.
So what is your plan for the fall sitting, Premier?
We're doing the final touches on it now, and I'll be able to communicate it to you.
What for you has been, I guess some people would look at this and say it's a delay. It's later than you traditionally have come back in the spring, or the fall rather. But for you, how have you approached the idea of when to come back this time specifically?
To be perfectly frank, I've been focused on COVID. And that has been the preoccupation of everything that I've been doing, along with public health, and looking at how do we deal with the economic health of the province. You know, we're still in the midst of this. We're watching what's happening across the country. Obviously, it's very concerning. Trying to make sure that we do everything we can on the advice of public health to help to continue to protect Nova Scotians and indeed the cooperation that we've had in Atlantic Canada to help protect Atlantic Canadians.
Premier, how do you respond to the opposition claims that you're simply trying to avoid accountability?
Listen, I don't really respond to it. I've been before you out in front every week. I've been communicating with Nova Scotians. I would dare say Nova Scotians have probably seen me more this year than they have in any year since I've been Premier. So,
on October 29th, you said policies were being drafted around housing affordability. Can you give us a status or an update on that?
yeah, Minister Porter will have more to say on that next week.
Any chance that you'll reimpose the eviction moratorium or use the state of emergency to freeze rent increases or tie rent increases to the rate of inflation?
Minister Porter's been working hard. I want to, on that with his team, but he'll have more to say on that next week.
So did you have anything to do with lifting the moratorium on evictions, or is that all Minister Porter?
Well, we would obviously have a conversation, but him and his team are laying out options. It's more than just. It's the whole issue of affordable housing. It's a very complex issue, and his team has been working very hard on it. But he'll have more to say on that next week.
So why lift the ban while there's still an ongoing state of emergency declared?
What we had was the ban was on due to COVID related. There's also some other issues that have been going on in terms of affordability. So, which is really, and Minister Porter, though, was looking at the complexity of the whole issue, and he'll have more to say on that next week.
Can you give us a sense of how you feel about the Clearwater sale and how that changes things in this province in terms of the fishing industry?
Well, first of all, when you think in one generation they built a company that's sold for $1 billion, this province, it's a phenomenal accomplishment by the founders. As well, the fact that when it did sell, that Mi'kmaq in this province are an equal partner in it, and I was very pleased to hear Chief Terry Paul communicate that Clearwater would be staying here in Nova Scotia.
Does it change, though, the situation in Southwest Nova in any appreciable way?
I don't think it's an issue of southwestern Nova Scotia. If you're referring to the moderate livelihood, it's an issue across the region. But buyer's licenses are still the same. All of that would be part of that. So it certainly gives the Mi'kmaq of this province, a tremendous opportunity of skill transfer, including deckhands, management of this company. If I haven't spoken directly to Chief Terry, we're arranging that. But I've been reading reports that the Mi'kmaq will have positions on the board. All of that things are positive stuff to continue to build competency within the fishing industry in the Mi'kmaq Nation. So all of that can be a positive thing.
Since you knew that Clearwater was on the market, were you concerned that it might wind up leaving the province, at least control of it might wind up leaving the province?
I didn't know it was on the market. I knew that they were involved at different times. You go back to the surf clam situation. The Mi'kmaq, a member two bought into the surf clam business side of the operation with them. I knew there was potential opportunity for a First Nations opportunity with them. But anytime you get a company that size that has headquartered here, of course you always worry about that. But I'm certainly pleased to know that that the new owner is looking to maintain its operation here in our province.
Your government, over the last few years, has taken steps to try to address domestic violence, both in terms of offering services, but I think also trying to take away the stigma and encourage survivors to come forward. And so having said that, I wonder what you make of this story that we saw earlier in the week where a woman who was an alleged victim ended up being thrown in jail and restrained out of her concerns about going to court and facing her attacker.
I don't know all the details of it, but I do know this. When I saw, it was shocking to me. There's no other way to put this. That the victim of domestic violence ends up being the one before the court system. Quite frankly, we know, and unfortunately, too many victims of domestic violence are scarred from the perpetrator. And when coming forward takes a tremendous amount of courage, an unbelievable amount of courage, and then to have the system respond in the way it's alleged to have responded to this victim is completely unacceptable in my view.
Is there any conversation that you've had at this point with either Minister Fury or perhaps even Mr. Hershoff about what you'd like to see done here, whether it's an investigation or an examination or anything else for that matter?
So I haven't spoken to the Independent Crown. Minister Fury and I just spoke briefly this morning about this. But there are many questions that I think need to be answered. What is the issue? Why the Crown would have sought to have the courts have her arrested? What was the handling when she was arrested? But go back to the very, I think, and again, this isn't, I'm not a lawyer and I haven't been in the court since, but I do want to say this, and particularly around domestic violence. It shows the lack of understanding by so many people of the terror of this terrible, terrible crime. I'm getting a bit emotional because I can tell you of all the things in my elected life, and I've had plenty come before me, but when it comes into my office, and a woman who's been traumatized by domestic violence is sitting before you, it has to have a huge impact in you, and it seems like the system has not responded to that. The terror that someone must feel, often dominated by someone much stronger and bigger and forceful, in their own home, terrified they're going to get out with their life, or trying to get their children out of this environment, and then to have our system respond that way, regardless of all of the other circumstances related to it, the system just needs to become more compassionate and understanding and recognize the tremendous courage that women are doing in this province to come forward. And until it does, until all aspects of our system responds in that caring, compassionate, kind way, we're going to see perpetrators get away with this horrible crime. I spent a lot of time as the Premier of this province trying to make sure that women felt safer in their own homes, that children were being cared for, and it just was shocking to me to read the alleged reports of what happened to this woman.
The Prime Minister has encouraged provinces and municipalities to take the necessary steps to lock down and act on COVID in recent weeks, but he's also urged provinces to come forward and ask for help with what they need. I wonder what you feel the federal government could or should be doing to help the battle against COVID in Nova Scotia.
Well, we've continued to work with the federal government. I actually have a call with him, the Prime Minister, tonight with fellow premiers. I think all premiers across the country would say the number one thing the federal government can do is become an equal partner in healthcare funding. When healthcare funding started, it was 50-50. In this province, the federal government contributes about 20 cents on the dollar when it comes to delivering healthcare to our province. All premiers have put forward a recommendation to the federal government that would see substantial increase in healthcare funding, which not only would allow us to deal with the issue of COVID, but other aspects of healthcare.
I just want to go back to something you said about, as long as the system isn't more.
We're going to give Natasha.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear Natasha.
There are no new cases of COVID today, but obviously we haven't seen a spike in recent weeks. So I'm wondering if you're still as concerned as you were on Monday when you imposed some new restrictions on people coming into the province, and we're really telling people we need to clamp down.
Yes, I am. I think we all should be. One of the things that comes out of the success Nova Scotians have had by working together and keeping our numbers low is complacency. We've all seen reports of people standing outside of a bar not necessarily wearing their masks, or people becoming a little more lax around the isolation component of this, where they're isolating with people who are moving around our community. All of those things are concerning, and it's why we took the steps we did last week or first of this week, and we'll watch. The next 2 weeks are going to be absolutely critical, I think. I'm watching what's happening across the country. Many of you would have heard me here. I think Brian may have written about it a few times. I'm talking about wanting to open up the economy, wanting to have more access into Atlantic Canada for commerce. But when you see the tremendous surge that's happening in communities right now, some of them are higher than they were in the first wave. As has been described to me by people that work with me and that I know, until we get COVID under control, the economic health and all of the other things really won't matter, because COVID has just ravaged so many other parts of our society. And that's why we're just working very hard to try to make sure we keep these numbers up. But we need the cooperation of Nova Scotians to continue to follow the public health protocols and continue to look out for each other. If something doesn't pass the common sense test, it's probably not a good idea to do it.
Just a follow-up to that, are you considering at all using rapid tests at the airport? I know that's something the opposition has been calling on for some time now.
So we would potentially look at that. As you know, there's a test right now going on in Alberta with international travel. There's a smaller test going on right now in Newfoundland and Labrador, rotational workers. They test them on day 5. But we as Atlantic Canadians, the premiers have been talking about that. The question becomes whether or not that test by itself breeds enough confidence to allow people then to come freely into the region. It may be a part of a broader testing scheme that as you open up.
Has Dr. Strain told you, are we officially in the second wave in Nova Scotia?
We haven't talked, and I haven't talked to him about that. I think he may have mentioned something about that on Monday or Tuesday when we were out. I hope this is the second wave and we keep the cases at the level they are.
Premier, Hawksbury County voted last week to get involved in the Jorgensen project. I'm wondering, as the local MLA, what you think of that project and what you think about the way the vote went.
So any project, as you know, that if it makes sense to the private sector, it makes sense. My position has always been that I haven't given loan guarantees. We reshaped how we did economic development in the province, as the private sector didn't think it was a good idea, and they couldn't get lending from a regular lending institution. Probably not a good idea for us as a government. So, but I also said if they felt as a community it was a good project, that's up to the municipality to go forward on it. I was very surprised that after the most recent election, which saw substantive change, that they would have passed a motion related to Gornston between the time of the election and the new swearing in of new council. But the new council has the authority and the ability to be able to change whatever happened in that short period of time.
Even though the previous council voted to sign the contract, your understanding is it can be undone?
It's my understanding, yeah.
And I just...
But on a very, if to take this council out of the way, provincially, federally, there's a long-standing clause that at the end of the election, before the transition of power, that you just maintain, government. You don't go and change and make substantive policy decisions. That this would have been one of them, and you take that out of the hands of the voter, because the voter made a decision. And they've elected a new council, and the decisions around that should have been left to the new council.
I want to make sure I'm interpreting what you said correctly about private sector funding. The province didn't put any funding in this. Did the proponent ask the province for funding, and did you say no because...
It was pretty clear. They were looking for a loan guarantee, which I said no to. That was when they communicated it to the residents. On the opening day, I wasn't there, wasn't invited. They talked about a loan guarantee from the province, and I called them and made it very clear there's no loan guarantee coming from the province. And I've been upfront and with them. They've kept me informed about what they were doing and all of that, but at no point did I have any decision in it, or quite frankly, was I going, or I shouldn't say I, on behalf of Nova Scotian taxpayers, were we going to be a funding partner in it? That's just not how we had moved towards economic development. I had said if the developer thinks this is a great idea, line up the money.
I'm going to go to the phones now. We have Andrew Rankin with the Herald on the phone. Go ahead with your question for the Premier, Andrew.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask you about, you said recently that rent control doesn't work to keep, rental rates down, but could you elaborate a bit more on that? Since other provinces have some type of rent control in place, and if not rent control, what's the solution here?
Minister Porter will have more to say on that, as I said to your colleagues next week.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Andrew.
Okay, I'm just wondering, just trying to understand why you've delayed recalling the House for so long. I mean, other provinces have managed COVID, and their legislatures have been sitting. So I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on why you've delayed recalling the House.
Yeah, sure. Most legislatures that have been sitting have sat, either they've been legislated to sit a specific date, or they have a minority government. Many of them had not been sitting in the spring before COVID. I know a few were in the process of sitting and then delayed because COVID started. In our case, as you would know, we sat in earlier in the year, January, February. Our session was over with before COVID actually took off. You would also know that we would have to get permission from the opposition to get out, which we did. And we will have a fall session, which we will lay out once I tidy up some details around it.
Andrew, do you have another question for the Premier?
Just what are those details that you need to tidy up around it, as you say?
I'll let you know when they're finished.
That's all the time we have for questions for the Premier today. Thank you, Premier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Minister, questions for you. What concerns do you have, Minister, about the reduction in flights at the Sydney airport?
Oh, it's very concerning, incredibly troubling, not as a regional minister, not as an MLA, just as a Cape Bretoner. The J.A. McCurdy Sydney Airport is very much the economic barometer for the island. Anytime you're sort of wondering about the economic activity, health, etc., you can always look to the airport and see what's happening there, and it'll give you a direct correlation to the health of the local economy. When the flights are busy with tradespeople, 5-6 flights a day, that means that there's a significant amount of income that's on the island, buying houses, trucks, kids, activities, etc. It's business travel, it's government travel. Lots of times it's connected to infrastructure builds and such. So when you have a lot of flights and you have a lot of people in and out of Sydney, that's always an indication that things are good. So I think that from an economic perspective, that's very scary. Also the fact that there's a significant amount of people directly and indirectly employed at the airport. Without a doubt, Mike McKinnon, the CEO, has had some tough conversations with those folks who in turn had some tough conversations with their families. There's nobody down there, I can tell you with certainty, nobody down there is thinking this is long term, that it's going to be mothballed for a long period of time. But the reality is that it's common knowledge among the airport stakeholders that Air Canada, WestJet, they set scheduling pretty far in advance. So, they're months and almost close to a year with respect to scheduling. So these things are never entirely short term. If you've missed a window, it's at least a few months. So we're into the new year before you see any activity, is what I've been told by a number of different people, but in particular Mike McKinnon, the CEO.
It's predominantly a federal issue, but is there a role for you folks to play in it, and are you at this point playing any kind of role in this?
No, at this point, it is certainly in the federal domain. I think that, it stems from the economic realities of the carriers. And that triggers into not only if there's going to be federal support, what the trajectory for as much as it can be anticipated and predicted looks like for COVID and for travel. I know that early on with respect to COVID, the airlines were and the airports discussed about what they could do to mitigate risk of infection and spreading, ensure overall arching protocols are as stringent, if not more so, than what Dr. Strang and the public health team rolls out. So I would assume as we get to a point where we can really see the trajectory of flights into the new year, there may be some requests on provincial governments to clarify what the testing, tracing, et cetera, pieces would be in terms of what's acceptable, and then we'll go from there. But without a doubt, that will be public Strang. It won't be a politician making that decision.
So is there anything the province can do to help the airport at this point in time?
Other than being engaged and working with our federal counterparts, and I know that's sort of a textbook answer, but that's the reality. The concern for me, and it's been one that has spread on all sort of facets of the economy, and it's certainly no different, and probably more so with respect to air travel. It's one thing to have protocols in place and isolation and masks and partitions and et cetera, and that's one part of the impact on the consumer demand. But just that demand itself is down. Under the perfect conditions, people just aren't traveling. So I think that there's public and government oversight and decisions, policy investment that do happen. But at the end of the day, until Canadians, Nova Scotians, are comfortable traveling, and of course the tourists from outside of the country that we rely on, until they're comfortable traveling and have a means to do so safely, this is going to be a significant impact, and we're just not going to see people.
And is there, what are you hearing from businesses in the area? They must be quite concerned about this.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's it's twofold. I mean, again, as I referenced, some of those tradespeople that really make up the bulk of the travel, they figure it out. And obviously, the lion's share of times it's to drive to Halifax and fly from here. So, you know, that money is, for what it's worth, still sort of, you know, staying in the area. People aren't looking to relocate or anything of that nature at this point. But it is concerning because, it, you know, that does, again, the airport does inject indirectly into the local economy, particularly in the shops and the restaurants and the services really close to the airport, which is on the Sydney-Glace Bay Highway. But again, there's a societal, philosophical impact of this that's incredible at home. This is probably sort of short term. This is the number one thing that I hear lately. Is that what are we going to do, and is it permanent? So that's the question. And there are people that don't travel or travel for leisure purposes or what have you. Everybody's concerned about this because of what it means. It's that economic and social pillar as much as it is a mode of transportation.
I wonder if we could ask you also about tourism, those tourism assistance programs that were announced in the last few weeks. What's the take-up been like on the two of them?
So we don't have any indication on the tax property piece yet. That's still, I think that closes on Monday, I believe. It's next week anyway, so still waiting on that. Brian, the last indication I had was that there was 13 for the loan guarantee program. So I don't really have anything that could unpack that, whether that's applicants or successful applicants.
That's the number I was given for applicants.
You
don't know if they're successful applicants.
No, I assume, that it's safe to assume that I would think most would if they know the criteria, but we'll let Dal figure that out. But that's obviously critical information for me to get, so we've given the direction that once it's completed, they'll get it to us.
I'm going to go to the phones. We have a student on the line, Minister, with the Signal, who'd like to ask you some questions. And
Sure.
forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong, but is it Zarnigar? Are you there?
Yes, this is Zarnigar.
Go ahead with your question.
So what is the province doing to prepare for an election during the pandemic and to ensure that people who are sick or out isolated and have an opportunity to vote?
That's not really something I can answer. That's probably, it's certainly not under the domain of the Minister of Business. I think that in any event, we've had a number of jurisdictions in Canada and obviously the U.S. That have gone through elections at different levels. So I think that, there's some anecdotal evidence and some jurisdictional knowledge to be gleaned from that. I think that, like anything else, the democracy will take its course. And even with the announcement from Pfizer, it doesn't seem as though a vaccine is imminent to the point where we can stop worrying about it. That's to say the least. So I think that, should there be an election period here in the province, I think there's enough information and working, of course, with Dr. Strang, the priority to make sure that health and safety of Nova Scotians and voters is paramount. But again, I really can't provide any detail on any specific planning that's taking place. But thanks for the question.
We'll now go back to the room. Any more questions for Minister McClellan? Thanks very much, Minister.
Easy. Oh yeah, you chased me down. You got me. You don't ask me.
Have Minister Churchill. Just need a moment.
Minister, can you start with what you know about what's happening with the Clayton Park family of schools and what you're preparing, what do you expect, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now there hasn't been, to our knowledge, any indication that there's an increased risk level in any of our schools. I know that community, generally speaking, are on higher alert right now, which is good. People need to be cautious. And Public Health did inform the Regional Center of Education, to be on standby and be prepared to respond in the event that we need to.
Minister, what is your sense of what would be a reasonable expectation for teachers to be able to flip the switch and go from having kids in their class all day to either the hybrid model or perhaps not having any kids in their class at all?
Well, we have a plan in place. That plan has been communicated to everybody since August. So from a systems perspective, I believe that we're ready to go. And people do need to get themselves in a place where they're mentally ready to do that in the event that we need to respond quickly.
And so having said that, what would be your message to parents in terms of what might be a reasonable expectation for them in terms of lead time to switch from the current model to another one if that becomes a necessity?
Well, I mean, we're going to take our lead from Public Health. So our role in this is to be prepared to respond if need be. And Public Health will be the ones that give us the direction on when and how that needs to happen.
I understand that, but I guess I'm thinking about it more perhaps from a child care perspective, if nothing else. And I'm wondering, should parents, in your view, based on what you know of the plan, should parents anticipate the possibility that they might only get 24 hours notice, only 48 hours notice? Is there kind of an agreed upon a window that it would operate within?
I don't know that we could be prescriptive at this point in terms of what that looks like. I think it's situational dependent, and any actions that we take will be determined by the investigations and directives from Public Health. So, I mean, we have to be prepared to move as quickly as necessary. I know that the system is ready. We have the logistics in place to do what's needed if we have to send a class home. If we have to move to a blended learning model or at home, we're prepared to do that from a system perspective. In terms of how quickly we need to turn that over, that will depend on the situation and what Public Health is advising us is necessary.
So if you're ready, how should parents ready themselves? What should they do?
I think it's really important that people have a plan. People do need to be adaptive in a situation like this and resilient. Parents do need to be thinking about this.
Have a plan to do what?
To move to an at-home learning model if needed. I mean, that's primarily where the response is kids going home. If we move to blended, it'll be the older students, which I know is easier for parents. But if we have to move to another lockdown situation, hopefully we don't. If we can keep this under control, people do need to be prepared to do that. They will have support from their teachers, from support staff. I think the support they'll get from the system will be improved from last spring in the event that we have to move to that model. And we've also, as the Premier and Dr. Strang have said repeatedly, urging employers to work with working families on solutions in the event that we need to move quickly.
Right now, there's no plans to make any changes in the Clayton Park area until you hear from something different.
Well, we have plans in place that we can execute on. There's been no directive to execute any of those plans to date.
As you know, the self-isolation rules have changed in Nova Scotia, requiring household isolation unless the returning individual can isolate outside of their household. I wonder if you feel, but the exception for rotational workers still applies, but it may be rescinded at some point if necessary. Should schools be treating the children of rotational workers any differently at this point?
We're gonna follow that protocol to the letter from Public Health. So in terms of what we do, we follow the directives of Public Health on that rotational worker and family policy.
Are you aware of any schools that have been treating the children of rotational workers differently?
I'm not, no.
Can you confirm that no one connected to the school was associated with this recent cluster?
I can confirm that we have not received a directive from Public Health to execute on any of our plans in any of our schools in Clayton Park at this point.
That wasn't the question I was asking. Is anyone associated with the school, have they tested positive?
I mean, I don't have the answer to that. That would be subject to the investigations of public health, and the department doesn't do those investigations. We do respond to the directors of public health based on the outcomes of those investigations.
Minister, how realistic an expectation is it if you're a parent with children in school that from one day to the next you can simply switch gears, leave your job, stay home?
Nothing about this situation is comfortable or easy for anybody. So the best that we can do is be resilient through this, respond as necessary, and be adaptive, not just as a government or an education system, but as individuals. That's what's required of us.
We'll now go to the phones. Minister, we have a student on the phone from the Signal. Talia, go ahead with your question for Minister Churchill.
Yeah, hi. Just wondering, if schools shut down for isolation periods, how is the province planning on compensating parents for childcare?
I'm just going to repeat that back to you to make sure I understand the question. So if we shut down childcare, or if childcare is needed from the parents, if we close schools down, how do we respond to that?
Yeah, will there be compensation provided?
Well, we were one of only 2 provinces that did continue to provide funding to the childcare sector and kept spaces open for parents in the event of a shutdown. Because again, if in a community, if we do go to a shutdown, that may very well impact the childcare sector as well. So we did work to maintain that sector whole and keep spaces available for parents. In terms of the response from a childcare perspective, we do have plans, again, if public health directs us, to move to a 50% model or closing down. So those are the options that we have available in the childcare space.
And that's all the time that we have questions today for Minister. Thank you, Minister.
When you say 50% or
So not every childcare center falls under regular, but the ones that we fund regular.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Morning, sir.
Morning, gentlemen, ladies. Afternoon, I guess.
Can we start, the Premier had mentioned to us that you and he have had a conversation this morning about the report we saw earlier this week about the domestic violence survivor who ended up being arrested and held in jail for not attending court. Could you tell us, I guess, first of all, your reaction to that story, and second, what, if anything, you're doing to look into that matter?
Well, what we've heard and what we've seen in the video is, to say the least, troubling. And it has caused both the Premier and I some obviously serious reflection. We've put a lot of time and energy into mitigating incidents of domestic violence, providing supports to survivors. We've advanced additional training, trauma-informed training, sensitivity training to all of the front line, made that available, and we're still seeing these types of outcomes. This is very difficult to manage, to be quite honest with you. But I'll say this. We have to continue our commitment to mitigating incidents of domestic violence. We have to have a different discussion. We need to know that there's a different understanding and that there's a different response, and we need a different outcome. I've dealt with this for 40 years. I've seen the worst of the worst. I had hoped that with the commitment and renewed effort of everybody involved, we'd see a change. And upon reflection, I'm not going to give up. We'll continue this discussion. I've asked yesterday in a briefing within the department, specific to these circumstances. I've asked for a review. I need to know what my authority is, how broad a review I'm able to consider and undertake. We need to change the outcome, and the circumstances of last week tell me we have a lot of work to do.
When you see a story like you did, and you balance that with the efforts that your government has made, which you've mentioned, how does it make you feel about the progress?
Well, we have made significant progress in some areas, but I think obviously there's more work to do, but we have to have a better understanding of the true impact that domestic violence has on victims and survivors, and how do we, as a government, as a community, as a province, change the behaviors of everybody involved so that we see outcomes that are supportive, are sensitive, are compassionate to the needs of those individuals who experience this trauma, only to be re-traumatized. And I don't know what the answer is, Mike, but I'm not giving up.
Minister, just finally, and specific to this example that we're talking about, you mentioned that you're asking for information about potential options for you vis-a-vis a review. What is it exactly that you're trying to find out, and what is it that you would like to potentially do here?
Well, what I need is a different outcome. And as I've said earlier, we've done significant work. We've invested heavily in supports and training, resourcing, understanding, and people. There is a change. Believe me, there is a change. But it's these incidents that I'm afraid are occurring only too frequently, and we're not aware of it. The only reason this even came to light is because this particular survivor is back before the courts on a charge of assault. We would not have otherwise known. I need to know that this is not a norm. I need to know that particularly in those areas of custody, that people are treated with dignity and respect, and that we have a full understanding of the circumstances of why they're there and how they came to be there. I'm not looking to point blame at anyone. I need solutions. I need a different way of thinking. I need a different understanding. And we can't, as a government, do it alone. We've had tremendous support from the Department of Community Services, from the Status of Women, transition houses across the province. I traveled a year ago, last fall. I did 9 roundtables hosted by individual transition houses, first voice discussions with survivors of domestic violence. They have identified to us some consistencies that exist in their exposure to the process. And those patterns of of disrespect and a lack of sensitivity and a lack of compassion to their circumstances are troubling. And we continue to work with a focus on providing supports to survivors, but obviously much more work required so that we all have a better understanding of the circumstances that these individuals are facing and how the impact of their circumstances as a victim impact their behaviors in other areas. I think it's a reasonable question to ask. Why would this individual choose not to appear in court? I know the answer to that. I've spent 40 years in this area. She fears for her life.
So by that
We have to find a better outcome.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but by that extension, does it trouble you that she would be charged with assault under these circumstances?
It troubles me that she's being re-traumatized. And the contributing factors to that are that she's back before the court herself now as an offender. As I said earlier, we need a different discussion. We need a different understanding to domestic violence, and we need a different response. And we all have to work towards a different outcome.
Minister, I want to ask about the announcement today about the province increasing the number of sex offender registration sites. Was there an inadequate number before, or what problem existed that this is solving?
No, there wasn't an inadequate number. I believe there were 19 previous sites between RCMP and municipal police services. This was actually a request that came from the RCMP to have all of their detachments designated as reporting sites. And what that does is it facilitates a more timely and easier response for sex offenders to report as they are required, for police to know that they are in their community, and that the system and data is as up to date as it possibly can be.
I want to ask as well about Nova Scotia's anti-cyberbullying law. The parents of Dylan Elar are considering possibly some action using that law to stop some of the online attacks that have been launched against them. I wonder whether you feel, that's what the law was designed for, that's a good use of the law, or, whether you feel that law has been, adequately used and in Nova Scotia since it's been enacted.
To the latter point, yes. The legislation itself and the service, quite frankly, has been exceptional. They've come to many solutions through the application of the cyberbullying legislation, as well as the resources within the cyberbullying unit. These types of harassments, depending on the circumstances, can be classified as criminal, or in the absence of criminal behavior, certainly inappropriate behavior. So the police would be the first point of contact when circumstances warrant a criminal investigation. So repetitive events can build the necessary evidence to establish criminal behavior. But that takes a much longer process. Where the cyber unit has been able to inject themselves in many areas from a public education perspective in our school systems, doing presentations after presentation, but as a support service to these circumstances and individuals who find themselves in these circumstances, really alternate solutions to the point that they've been able to engage the social media platforms and have the material removed.
Minister, on another issue, the dry cells, as you know, there's an appeal, and you have department lawyers monitoring this appeal. What is the goal for the province in terms of dry cells?
Well, I think the purpose of the monitoring the appeal is to understand all of the contributing circumstances and ultimately the outcomes of that hearing, that appeal. Dry cells we have a dry cell policy in the province of Nova Scotia. This is all around the prevention, mitigation of the introduction of contraband into our facilities. And you would know we made a significant investment, I believe now 2 years ago, to have our body scanners installed in all of our correctional facilities. That has had a significant impact on the reduction of illicit contraband into the facilities. What it's also picking up is contraband that's embedded in body cavities. That's
What I'm trying to get at, do you have any issues with the human rights abuses that are being alleged?
I don't know, I'm not sure which circumstances you're referring to specifically.
Under constant monitoring, lights on all the time, all the stuff that's come out of this.
Certainly I have a concern around the human rights element, but at the same time we have to find a balance, and that's what I was alluding to earlier. When the body scan equipment identifies contraband embedded in a body cavity, then and only then, as a last resort, are the dry cells being used, and that's where we have to find a balance of safety for the individual and for the staff and for other inmates in the facilities. We often see individuals relinquish contraband post or during dry cell. That's not uncommon. That's the purpose of the dry cell.
So the policy's good as it stands?
No, I've actually asked for a review of the policy. I need to understand that. As you know, this has just become topical in the last few days, brought forward. So I have asked for a review within the department and how we could further mitigate the use of dry cells. As I said, dry cells are used as a last resort. The introduction of the body scans have made a significant difference in the volume of illegal contraband in our facilities and inherently greater safety. So we'll see what that review of policy uncovers and if there's a need or an opportunity to change.
When did you ask to securing either the Port Hawksbury Courthouse or another location to continue with the Desmond inquiry?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part of your question, Natasha.
Is there any update to securing the Port Hawksbury Courthouse or another location to continue the Desmond inquiry?
We're much closer, as I understand it, to finalizing an alternate site. The preferred site is Port Hawksbury. I'm led to believe that Judge Zimmer is working very close with our court services to bring that to a conclusion. And even as recently as today, I'm led to believe that there may actually be dates set, but I'm not aware of what those dates are.
Is there any concerns or any thoughts about this report out of Lunenburg about the First Nations family who brought complaints of racial harassment to the RCMP and I guess at least in their view a less than substantive response from the police to those concerns?
Well, I'm always concerned when Nova Scotians express racist behaviors directed to them because of their ethnicity or background. In these circumstances, my understanding is that that the family have made a complaint, a formal complaint. The first step in that complaint process, it's an RCMP agency obviously, is for an internal review. We'll allow that process to run its course. I'll certainly be interested in the outcomes.
I have to go to the phones, guys. Sorry, Elizabeth. We do have Andrew on the phone with a question for the minister with the Herald. Andrew Rankin, go ahead.
Hi there. Just wanted to get the status on the conflict of interest commissioner's review of your involvement in the mass shooting inquiry process. Has he given you a decision at this point?
No, not at this point, Andrew. I haven't heard back from the commissioner.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Andrew.
Once you do get his decision, will you make that his decision public?
That's a question best directed to the commissioner. That would be his document.
Elizabeth, we have time for one more question from you.
I just wanted to find out when you asked for the review of the dry cell policy.
Yesterday.
Okay.
Thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
Minister Fury.
Next up, we have Minister Porter.
Minister, wanted to ask you on behalf of a colleague. The Information and Privacy Commissioner recently ruled that CBRM is basically breaking the law in having only released 28 pages of a close to 1,000-page document related to the port contract. She raised all kinds of issues with the way they even approached it and interpreted the FOIPOP Act. What, if any, involvement is your department having in looking at that at this point to make sure that they're actually doing what they're supposed to do?
So the municipality or anyone that receives a FOIPOP, any municipality, CBRM or otherwise, has the responsibility to complete that. Obviously, they would be expected to be open and transparent around how they did that. They would redact what they felt was necessarily, needed to be redacted or whatever it might be, or nothing if that was the case. The commissioner obviously has the ability to rule how he or she wishes to rule, but ultimately this would be the decision of municipality. The expectation would be to put out there what they felt was required, and if there was some reason that things were redacted, you would have to ask, I guess probably the new mayor now of the municipality and that council or administration reasons for redacting if they knew, potentially what that was or why things were redacted. Right. I'm not sure of the exact file, Mike, to be honest, so I don't know. But
okay, but having said that, this is certainly not the first time, and not even in the last couple of months, where we've seen an example where a municipality basically completely misinterpreted the FOIPOP Act and how it's supposed to work and what they can and cannot make public. Do you, as the minister responsible for municipalities, have a concern that municipalities are not aware enough of, number one, how the FOIPOP Act works, and number two, their duties under it when responding to requests?
So every municipality has the ability to reach out to their legal team, their legal counsel. If they don't understand it, and it's expected, though, that their legal counsel, that's why they have them. They're supposed to understand the legislation. That's who they would go to for counsel. They should be reading that. At that point, though, if somebody's still confused, it's their responsibility to ensure that they're not confused and to know what the Act means. But if they need maybe some guidance in that by way of the definition of how it should work, I would consider I'm not going to offer them legal advice or tell them what they should put in or not. That's up to them. They are responsible to their electorate to be open and transparent as anyone else is when doing these things, and there's reasons why they may redact or withhold some information. There are rules around all of that.
Sorry, Minister, what I'm trying to get at, though, is that there are demonstrable cases in this province of municipalities that either have willfully or inadvertently contravened the Act. Is there a recognition within your department that it's a problem and that perhaps there, at the bare minimum, needs to be better education at the municipal level of how to handle FOIPOP requests?
I will say that if there's more education required, then it should be given. As far as us being
Is there a plan to give it?
We've not been asked to give it. We've not been contacted. I have not, and let me be clear, Mike, I get your question. Nobody has come to me as minister and said we need to go out and educate municipalities on how the FOIPOP Act works.
Okay, so there's nobody in other words, I think I understand you, but just so I make sure I do. In other words, no one even within your department has come to you and say, Minister, we're observing some issues at the municipal level. We think we need to get a little proactive on this, on the education front.
That is correct. Nobody has come to me to date to say that.
And so just to put a bow on this, are you satisfied at this point when it comes to the level of understanding and interpretation of the Act at the municipal level?
I have been until you've just told me that there appears to be some issue. I don't know what the issue is, but it's always my first concern as minister is that municipalities right across this province and their administrations and their legal teams and council learns along the way, and I know it's quite a learning curve for new. I've been there. understand what their responsibilities are. And FOIPOP is something that's been around for a number of years now and is quite an important issue for people when they're filing these things. So again, there's a process that they should follow, and I will agree they should understand that process. What they choose to put in there, however, as a municipality is a decision that they will make. And I'm sure they do that, or at least I would think they would do that, I can't speak for them, through consultation with the right people.
Mr. Porter, last week, when the CAO of Annapolis County briefed council on the Gordonston deal that they had just passed, he suggested that the province made some changes to the Municipal Government Act in order to make this project possible. There were some reforms he did in 2019 that eliminated a list of allowed projects, and then there was a reform earlier this year that removed ministerial oversight for projects over $100,000. Were either of those changes made with the Gordonston project in mind?
No, we implemented, I think, we passed Bill 92, I think it was, Brian, is the right number, which was given municipalities right across this province powers to expend. That allowed them to make decisions around projects that they might, there was a whole list of things. Every time they wanted to do something, as you may recall, you've been around here a while, they would come back and they would want a bill or an update, amendment to the MGA to allow them to do more things. This was done, powers to expend covered a number of things, but I think if you read in the preamble of that bill, a lot of this was around the energy sector that we were thinking, developing windmills and things like that, that they had the ability to go out. We wanted them to be, you know, obviously proactive in the economic development sector. That was more about that. This wasn't one thing like a Gordonstone or any other kind of specific project at all. I'm not sure that, I'm trying to think back how long that's been now. I want to say 2 falls ago we passed that legislation, if I'm not mistaken. I think 2 years, so I'm not sure Gordonston was even in view at that time.
So did you have any discussions with the municipalities or with the Premier, for that matter, about Gordonston and the need for these reforms?
I haven't had, no.
So I'm just wondering, because of those reforms, you, particularly the one earlier this year, you would have had oversight of a project like Gordonston. They would have had to come to you and said, we want permission to spend over $100,000 on this.
No, they are their own elected body, autonomous and able to make decisions and move forward on any number of projects. You know, how they fund those, whether it's private sector or whether how they reach out to do that, it's up to them, but we don't have to approve that.
Before Bill 92, this kind of project wouldn't have been allowed. It wasn't on the list. It would have been a piece of legislation.
Bill 92, they would have probably come if there was a certain, maybe, it would have depended on probably lots of things, but yeah, they may have come and asked to have an amendment so they could have done it, but that wasn't the case in this situation. We gave them Bill 98 across the province so that they didn't have to come every time they wanted to do something. You know, whether they wanted to buy a truck. Here's an example that they used to have to, if they wanted to go out and buy something over $100,000, a service vehicle for their municipality, they used to have to write the minister and ask permission. Well, let me be clear, at no time in all the historical records that I asked to be reviewed before we signed off on this bill, we never said no. So there was no reason not to implement some simple procedure. So they didn't have to come back to us to buy a service vehicle that was over $100,000.
In the case of this project, should there have been oversight?
Sorry, Brian?
In the case of this project, should there have been oversight?
This project, yeah, so at that time, they would have probably had to come to do that, I guess, yeah. Not thinking about it, they would have had to come and probably ask at that time, I guess, to do an expenditure like that. I would say, you know, I'd have to go back and make sure that with staff, but I would say, yeah, that's probably quite accurate.
Minister, are you concerned about the number of people that have been evicted since the COVID-19 eviction ban was lifted?
Sorry, I missed the first part.
Are you concerned about the number of people who have been evicted since the COVID-19 eviction ban was lifted?
I can't tell you how many people, I'm not sure.
Are you concerned about how many people who have been turned out?
Oh, look, we've said every week here, we're always concerned. We've been working hard to try to place as many people as we can. As a matter of fact, I looked at data this week earlier because of you know, the number of people that are out there looking for places and the work that we've been doing to help place people. We've already placed more people in the first 6 months of this year than we did in all of last year. So what it says is the investments we're making, the people that we've put on the ground to help us, is having an impact. Is that all? The answer is no, we need to do more, and I'm going to have a little bit more to say about that next week.
At least 400 people, to our knowledge, have been evicted since that ban was lifted. I wonder if you would advocate for it to be reinstated while the state of emergency continues in Nova Scotia.
Thanks for the question. Look, as I said, I'll have more with regards to details around some of the things that we're going to be implementing, probably next week as it looks right now. So we'll be happy to share that with you in as much detail as we can next week.
You said there were more placed this year. Can you give us the raw numbers? How much is it?
I wish I had the number right in front of me, John, but we can provide it, I think, for you. But we were, I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but I can tell you it's a big number. We've already placed more people this in 6 months, and I want to say in the 500-ish range. I'm going to say I saw a number, and we placed, I think, less than that all of last year, maybe. But again, I stand to be corrected. We can provide the numbers.
Two of the local leadership candidates came out this morning and suggested there should be caps on how much rent can rise in Nova Scotia. I guess that's a form of rent control, which is something that the government has rejected in the past as an idea. What do you make of those former colleagues of yours promising that?
Yeah, look, it's great that they're on the issue. I think we all understand as a government and as a caucus and as elected officials, whether it be provincial, federal, or municipal, that housing is an issue, not just here in Halifax, not just here in Nova Scotia, nationwide. This is an issue, and not only in big cities. It's reflective of population. Obviously, it's no matter where you look, it's an issue. So it's interesting, and it's great to see those both that have come out. Putting forward some ideas around what they might do as our next wannabe premier. So I think that that's good. It's a topic that's going to be around for a while.
One of them is the candidate you've endorsed. Have you had any conversations with Mr. Rankin about how to address the housing issues in Nova Scotia?
No, that would be inappropriate for me to do that. He's a candidate out there. He's doing that. He has to step away from cabinet, as you know. There's things that we're talking about for some policy issues that I'll be talking about more next week. So it would not be, I personally don't believe it would be right for me to talk to any one candidate. I think once we've put together our policy side, all candidates will have an idea of where we are currently with the current premier and current status of government. When one of them is elected to take over on February the 6th and forward, I'm sure they'll have some ideas whether they like what we may do. They may build on that. They may change that. That's going to be up to them.
That's all the time we have today for Minister Porter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
Minister Hines.
Minister, what did we, as a province, pay for the land in Blandford where the ferry will drop?
What was the purchase price, John?
Yeah, because the asking price was roughly $2.5 million. Is that what we paid?
I can't tell you what the answer to that is, but I'll find out for you.
And how did you determine, or your department determine the size of the ferry? Because I've talked to people who say it's just way more ferry than that island needs.
Well, I guess the design is a function of what the anticipated traffic would be, and there's an expectation that it'll be a fairly busy route. Certainly opening up a nice new area of the province in Greater Tancook and Little Tancook. So that's the process. So the people who designed the ferries would have made those estimations.
So do you think we need an 18 vehicle ferry for that run?
Yes, I think we do.
And why?
Well, because it's a match for the kind of traffic that we would be expecting that we would have there.
Is Tancook big enough to see that level of vehicular traffic through the run of a day, given that you're looking at far more runs each day than what happens right now with the passenger-only ferry?
Yeah, that's the calculation that has been made. Yes.
Do you have sites in mind for the docking facilities for both Big and Little Tancook?
They're being enhanced, the ones that are there.
So I believe they use a government wharf in Big Tancook. Is that right? So
that's right. Yeah.
They'll be able to drive off onto that wharf.
They're being rehabilitated or improved to be receivers for the new boat.
And are you going to upgrade the roads between now and then? Because there's like one dirt road through most of town.
Yeah, it's always been a challenge there, John, in terms of the road system in Big Tancook. But we're expecting that having this link will enable us to provide better service into that community.
People who own cars need to get safety inspection on Big Tancook? Will people who own cars on Big Tancook need to get safety inspection?
Yeah, they'll have to get registrations and car inspections and all of those kinds of innovative things.
We're all kind of laughing, but that hasn't been the case, right?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Minister, you had previously said that this year's cost for the Yarmouth Ferry would probably go down. Can you give us any indication what they are?
We will be. We're working with Bay Ferries to find innovative ways to reduce the costs, and we will be releasing the results of that in a future economic forecast.
Has the U.S. Border Customs Agency signed off on the costs of the Bar Harbor terminal?
The costs of it?
Yeah, have they finished it, or their final renovations?
Yeah,
and have they signed off? And have they announced the cost?
Yeah, it's largely complete, and it will be ready to go when we're in a position to transport passengers to and from the U.S. Of course, based on the COVID stuff. I don't have that information at this time.
Minister, has work been completed to remove and clean up the pipe between the boat harbor and the pulp mill?
The work on the pipe?
Yeah, pipe was supposed to start.
Yeah, I think
the
that has
26th
been,
of October.
Yeah, I think that has been. If it's not completed, it's very close to it. We've been focusing on the actual cleanup of the aerated settling pond and the boat harbor itself in terms of the sludge process there.
So the cleanup of the settling pond and the sludge has been sidetracked, has it not, by the discovery of more sludge underneath the layer that was...
Not so much sidetracked. It's really, Brian, the course of the investigation that is underway to determine just what the condition is. It's fairly complex in terms of who's responsible for what sludge, but boreholes have been taken. We don't have the full results from them back yet, but we're expecting them very soon, and that will tell us just what we have in there for sludge.
Should Nova Scotians expect they're going to have to pay for the layers of sludge that are underneath the northern pulp layer?
We've already dedicated almost $300 million towards that cleanup. So Nova Scotians know that that money is committed to that particular cleanup. We'll be reserving money now for 5 or 6 years to be able to get this done.
Right, but the money that's already been set aside for the cleanup was for Boat Harbor proper. It wasn't for the settling ponds, was it?
Well, the settling ponds are part of the entire cleanup. Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are you expecting there's going to be an additional cost now that this sludge has been discovered?
We're not at that point yet. We're not sure just what the test will reveal on the sludge. If it is the natural sludge that was there prior to the industrialization of the process, we're not looking at removing that, and that's what the boreholes will reveal.
Minister, can you tell us if you have any concerns about Highway 101 twinning near the Windsor Causeway and the impact it will have on fish who pass through the Avon River?
Well, the impact there is actually from the abattoir that is being designed, which is a Department of Agriculture file per se, and is incidentally associated with our highway construction. We're concerned about the safety of the construction area as we move through that area, because, as you know, there's some occupied areas there, and so we're very concerned that we maintain a good, safe passage through there as we go along. But the idea of the fish passage and so on is with DFO, to whom we have an application in too, and the operation of the abattoir itself will be with agriculture.
Minister, you said just a moment ago in terms of, in response to a question from my colleague, that the Bar Harbor facility is largely complete?
Yes.
It's not ready yet?
Well, it'll be ready when we're ready.
So, sorry.
Could you run the ferry there tomorrow if you were able to do it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So,
But you have permission to do that?
Pardon?
You have permission?
I understand. You could check with Bay Ferries, I'd advise you, but the information we have is that the facility is ready to go.
Just back on Tancook, I'm wondering, was that a project that was put forward by the province or a project that was put forward by the feds?
Well, ferry response is provincial responsibility, these inter-provincial ferries, and I mean, we've been building ferries for as long as we've been in Nova Scotia, and long before the invention of the automobile. So we felt that was an area that needed some attention. And when we got the indication from the federal government that they're ready to share 50-50 in the construction of the ferries, there's three of them, New Country Harbour, Little Narrows, and Tancook, then we felt it was time to move on that particular installation.
That's all the time we have for questions for Minister today. Thank you, Minister.
Good. Thank you, folks.
And up next, we have Minister Glavine.
Minister. Hi, Mike. Minister, as we get information about potential COVID-19 vaccination, what does Nova Scotia know about how it will potentially access that, what kind of dosage it can expect, all of those sort of things?
I mean, it's a great question, Mike, and it is on the minds of Nova Scotians, and especially those that are frail seniors and underlying health conditions. But to be honest, at the moment, those details have just not been worked out. Dr. Strang, I know next week will have a key meeting with his counterparts across the country to start looking at the very specific questions that you have just asked.
So just one other question on that then. Do you have any sense as to whether or not distribution would be equitable, whether or not there's a risk that some provinces might be shortchanged compared to others? What, if anything, do you know about that?
So all I can say there is that last week when health ministers were on an FPT conference, still, of course, everybody in very early days, and perhaps the very nature of the first vaccine and its requirements for vaccinating are going to be challenging in that it's one that needs a very cold storage process and so forth. My understanding from the federal minister is that every province would be looked after in an equitable way, and we know certainly that our frontline workers, there are certainly populations that will have to be looked at very strongly. So I came away from the meeting feeling confident that Nova Scotia would certainly get, equitable treatment across the country.
Is it your sense, Minister, that it'll be needs based? Because as you know, this province has an older population and more morbidity than other provinces. So is it going to be doled out that way too, or is it per capita?
My understanding is that these are the details that Dr. Strang and the chief medical officers that have been monitoring COVID from day one have obviously seen what's happened to vulnerable populations, and I'm sure they will be speaking to that reality throughout the negotiations for the number of Nova Scotians that will eventually be vaccinated.
On the topic of vaccines, Minister, just checking in on the flu vaccine, are you aware of any shortages or struggles to get enough of the vaccine in Nova Scotia?
So there are some pharmacies now. We have moved to a very, very strong process of distributing the flu vaccine through our pharmacies. And there are some, there are I guess, some known shortages at the moment. But in a year where there is considerable take-up of the flu vaccine, but even aside from that, the flu vaccine arrives in the province in batches. So there are still a number of dates when flu vaccine will be arriving in the province. There is every indication at the moment, based on the extra ordering of flu vaccine, that we will have sufficient for Nova Scotians.
Do you know if we've been able to contain the cluster of COVID cases in Clayton Park? What are you hearing about that?
So I know the response there in terms of tracing and testing now. We have a very refined process, I would say, from the early months of COVID. And I guess we would need some days yet to have full confirmation. There are no cases today. A testing site has been set up in the Clayton Park area. So that means that, again, once the screening is done, it will be available now for a large number of people in that area to have access to testing.
Minister, do you know how many people have been tested at that mobile site?
At the mobile site there, no, I don't at the moment. Dr. Strang will be giving an update tomorrow, so he would have that information at that time. I think it's the former furniture, the brick furniture store is my understanding as to where it's set up.
As you know, your department's plan for long-term care's response to the second wave includes regional COVID units. Have you got them all up?
So we at the moment have 6 that I can identify today. The communities are what I will provide because there are still some families and so on that have to be, I guess, contacted and medical personnel. But it'll be Yarmouth, Kentville, Truro, Sydney, Antigonish, Halifax, Dartmouth are the first 6, and there could be others added as negotiations are finalized.
And just to be clear, these are existing long-term care facilities who have made capacity to have units within their homes that people will be transferred to if they get sick with COVID.
So it's a way of asking me, are they in hospitals or in long-term care? So we were just able to identify the communities at this stage. So it could be a hospital facility or a long-term care facility.
Was the necessary staffing available for these, Minister, or did you have to recruit additional people?
No, it's looking like staff availability, and again, we all know that there can be deployment now if we went into a surge situation, but certainly for the current expectation, we would have staffing available.
Those that are that might be in nursing homes, will those nursing homes have to assume the cost of those units, or will Nova Scotia Health provide the staffing and costs?
It will, the costing is part of the COVID response fund that the province has.
So there won't be any additional costs for nursing homes?
So, no, it will be part of what the province and the federal government have set aside for those measures that need to be taken during the pandemic.
And they've expressed to us that their concern early on in this, and maybe it's been settled, but was that they would lose staffing or have to devote staffing to these units that would take away from their normal operations. And what's your...
No, I think through negotiating, they've been able to find a resolve, and obviously we'd have a dedicated staff if they're looking after COVID patients.
And Minister, I know you can't tell us where these are, but are these 6 ready to go? If there was a surge today or tomorrow, are they ready to snap into action?
Yeah, there's really just a few of the very fine details that are remaining, but those sites now have agreed to take COVID patients if that is the case during the second wave, which is certainly, as we look across the country, is being experienced.
Okay, and just to be clear, you will let us know what those facilities are when you've dotted the i's, crossed the t's, right?
Yes, absolutely. Each of those places will be made known.
I'm going to go to the phones. Andrew Rankin has a question for Minister Levine. Andrew, go ahead.
Doctors are still seeing long delays in getting blood testing results in urgent cases. Like, so what's being done to address those delays? And is there a standard wait time for those results to be made available in urgent cases?
It's my understanding that doctors are able to contact any of the 35 sites. We're now at 35 sites where blood tests can be booked, and I think physicians have a priority opportunity to book a test. Or, like any change, there were certainly some delays and challenges in the early days, but those have been worked out to a very high degree.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Andrew.
So are you saying that there aren't any, significant backlogs in getting these results completed and back to the doctor?
No, there still are a few areas for sure that would have a longer wait than what should be a turnaround time for a blood test. But those have been dramatically reduced over the last number of weeks.
Andrew, go ahead with one more question for Minister Levine.
I'm okay. Thank you.
Back to the room. No, well, we do have a moment. We do have a student on the line, Minister, with the signal. Her name is Talia. She does have one question for you.
Sure.
Talia, go ahead with your question for the Minister.
Yes, hi. I was just wanting to know how you expect those returning to Nova Scotia to afford to isolate outside of their home, away from others, with the new update on isolation regulations.
Yeah, I asked that question myself with the department people as opposed to any government response at this time. And I think there have been maybe a few examples in the past where there have been some support. So we're looking at options at the moment.
And that's all the questions we have for Minister Levine. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
How are you, Kelly? Minister Kelly? I wondered, first of all, your reaction to what we heard in terms of testimony at the Community Services Committee meeting this week, and whether you were surprised to hear that some people were exchanging sex for rides to the grocery store or for their kids to make appointments.
We never want to hear a story like that. We've been making a number of investments to better support our clients, and we would just hope that if ever anyone is facing that kind of choice, that they reach out to their caseworker who can connect them with appropriate supports.
Were you surprised to hear this?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised when I hear that people look for ways to get the things they need. What I would just say is that we want to make sure that people understand that there are organizations that are there to help them, and we can connect, their caseworkers can connect them with those organizations.
Do you feel it says anything about the adequacy of either the programs and services that your department is running for people who are poor, or the amount of money that they get?
I think that we have to remember that not everybody understands that they can reach out to DCS and get help. It hasn't always been that way. We've been working really hard to change the culture at DCS and to connect people with the support they need for whatever their needs are. Sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's finding new skills so that they can earn more money. As you know, we have changed income assistance so that people can keep more of the money that they earn, and so people may not realize that, and that we spend basically $1.5 million in Cape Breton alone every year, helping people access employment skills and supports. And we want to make sure that people know that help is out there, and we want to make sure that people know that if they reach out to DCS, they will get help.
At the end of the day, Joanna Letulippe-Rochon says, and her message was loud and clear at this committee, is people simply need more money. Is that not a valid concern?
I think that you've seen a number of improvements over the last number of years. We do know that the poverty rate has been going down throughout the province as well as Cape Breton. But the fact of the matter is that poverty is a long-standing problem, and it's probably not going to be solved overnight. Every year we make investments because we want to help more people live better lives, and we are working to do that. Do we have more work to do? Absolutely.
Minister, what I'm curious about though is if we look at this example specifically, is this a situation where there would be help for those people so they wouldn't have to resort to that, and they're just not aware of it, so it's a promotional and an education issue? Or is this a situation where there aren't enough resources and more needs to be dedicated toward the issue?
So I can't answer that because I don't know about the individual cases. I don't know why it was that they didn't know about it. What I can tell you is that that we do have resources there and they can access them. But I fully take, sometimes people don't know about them. And sometimes people are afraid to reach out. If in the past they haven't been treated well, and we know this is the case for many people from marginalized communities, that they may not feel comfortable reaching out. We want to let them know that we're from the government and we're here to help. We really are.
I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it sounds to me like what you're saying is nobody should ever have to resort to this, because if it's that desperate, that the department will take care of them.
We want to make sure that people have what they need to be able to get where they need to go. If they need to go take a child to an appointment, if they need to get groceries, there are programs that assist people to access transportation in Cape Breton. There are a number of them. And we also have ways to help people earn money other ways.
Minister, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, as the minister responsible for the status of women, your thoughts on the woman who is facing charges because she refused to testify against her abusive husband or abusive partner?
We know that studies show us that usually, and it's usually a woman, it's not always a woman, but usually a victim of domestic violence, a woman, is, I think the last statistics I saw were they were attacked at least 7 times before they ever report it to the police. It takes a lot of courage for a woman to report assault by the person who is supposed to love them and care for them to police. So it is deeply disturbing when we see what we saw. And I reached out to Minister Fury immediately after hearing about this, and we're looking at this because this should not be happening. A person who has been victimized already should be lauded for their courage in coming forward, and we want to make sure that they are treated with respect.
And what, if any, effect do you think knowing what happened in this case will have to people who are facing a similar situation, and whether or not they'll want to come forward?
I think it's already so difficult for victims of domestic violence to come forward. You know, whether it's here or anywhere, women don't come forward. The first time it happens, they're probably dealing with shock. And this is the person who is supposed to love them and look after them. So then they finally make a complaint to the police, and there may be good reasons why that person does not want to testify. And I think we have to respect the victim.
On top of all of that, the police charged her for assaulting one of them. What do you think of that?
Again, I've spoken to Minister Fury about this. You heard him earlier. He wants to deal with this, and he is looking at what is it he has within his authority to deal with that. But I think that all of the actors in the system need to ask themselves, what is it we're trying to achieve here? And I don't think it is charging a woman who has reported domestic violence. I don't think anybody wants that.
You've talked quite regularly about this subject since you took on this file.
Yes.
You've made all kinds of announcements about programs and funding and all of that stuff. Yeah. How does it feel after all of that to see something like what we saw on Monday?
It was deeply distressing.
Those are all the questions today. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
And that concludes Cabinet Outs for today.